Hello everybody, Mannix here. Got a little ballistic test video for you here today. We're going to be shooting out of this Taurus Judge Magnum with the 3-inch chamber right here. If you're not familiar, it is a step above the typical Taurus Judge. This other one I happen to have carrying on me today is a Taurus Judge Public Defender Poly, which has the same chamber length as the standard Judge. Basically, all the standard Judges have this barrel length despite this configuration right here. This happens to be the smallest, shortest version they currently offer, as far as I know. The Magnum not only has an inch longer barrel, but also a ½ inch longer chamber. So not only can it also take the 2.5-inch 410 shot shells, it can also take 3-inch shot shells. And on top of that, you have a little bit of extra distance here, which should mean a little bit more muzzle velocity. Rounds we're going to be firing today: 410 Birdshots, 2.5-inch, ½ ounce, 9-shot, 1250 FPS. Loads, any Judge can take these because they're 2.5. But we also got some 3-inch 410 Slugs, which are rated at 1755 FPS, 114 grains. Then we have these critical Hornady Defense 410s, also 2.5-inch. So again, any Judge can take these. It's got a Slug at the top and two 35 caliber balls behind it. The Slug is 41 caliber, and it should expand if it works correctly. Next, we have these PDX 410 Defenders. These are very popular. It's got, normally I've seen the ones that are 2.5-inch that have 3 plates and then 12 BBs, but this again is the 3-inch version where we have 4 plates and 16 BBs going behind them. And then we just have some double-aught buck 3-inch 410 gauge here, and then a 250 grain 960 FPS XTP jacketed hollow point 45 long Colt, which again the Judges can all take. So this guy right here, this one, and this one are all 2.5-inch. Any Judge can take these, but these guys I'm very curious about because these are 3-inch shots, and I want to see if our Judge Magnum really does anything more substantial than any typical Judge. I have 15 packs of 40 paper plates. So we're just going to fire through these things. If you just compare the rounds to other rounds, just seeing how they do ballistically within the same targets, the same amount of wall, let's just say, so we can still see percentage-wise what does better than what. Yeah, it's not FBI ballistic gel, but we're going to start with this Fiocchi Target Max 410 Birdshot. It ejected okay. That's a little pattern right here. How many plates did we get through? This many. One pack, about 40 plates or so. So that's just gonna be our starting point. Got a nice little spread. It pretty much got the entire diameter of the plate at least, but all right, see what the others do. Let's just go straight into our bullet. That's not even a shotgun round. The 45 long Colt, 250 grain XTP jacketed hollow point rated at 960 FPS. Woo! Got a kick! So unfortunately, I'm probably gonna have to redo that round. It looks like I grazed the top of it. Take 2. Looked a little better. So this is the top. There's our entry hole. It's nice and clean. Oh, it's expanding like it should. Oh, it's getting bigger. And there it is. So we got this many plates. I want to say that's maybe about 180. So almost 50% of the way there. About a third. Mushroomed out pretty nicely. It's a little deformed in kind of an odd way, but we got some flattening, some expansion. Certainly did better than our Birdshot. 114 grain, 3-inch 410 Slug. I've seen a lot of videos talking about the 2.5-inch slugs going up against the typical 45 long Colts. And the general consensus is they are not as good as the 45 long Colts. There's basically no reason why you would pick the Slug. But a 3-inch Slug, let's see if it does anything different. So it looks like I hit the lower right corner. It's still going. Penetrated a little further. We got it right here. This plate is where it stopped. So it looks like it penetrated slightly further. Here is the 45 long Colt. Right here we have our Slug. It's certainly a much smaller projectile. It did not flatten out as much, which makes sense. It's not a hollow point. It's just a typical Slug. 250 grains right here. 3-inch Slug is 114 grains, so significantly lighter. It's less than half the weight of the 45 long Colt. It penetrated a little bit, maybe like 10%, 15% further. We're now going to step back down to 2.5 inches. The 410 triple defense by Hornady, 41 caliber Slug. That's a hollow point, I believe, at the top, and then followed by 2 35 caliber balls. And it's saying it's rated at 750 FPS. We're getting 3 projectiles in this one. All right, so it's gonna be a little trickier because we got 3 projectiles now. I'm not really sure. I definitely hit up here. Here they are. So right here is about where these 2 projectiles ended, at least. Well, I dug around for a bit. I found these 2 projectiles, which I'm assuming are the balls. And then that red bit that I think was at the nose of the slug, but I did not find the slug, so let me just fire one more time. All right, Hornady, critical defense, 2.5-inch shot, take 2. All right, so I aimed at the left. Looks like we have 3 projectiles here, so that looks like that's where we hit. Makes a nice triangular gaping wound right there, actually. I kind of like that. Because they're grouped together pretty nicely, even at the same range of the other 2. It looks like it went a little bit farther than our 45 long Colt did, and our slug, I think. Oh, there's something. Fish this sucker out. Not quite as much deformation as last time, but we got something there. I'm assuming it's one of the balls. There's our slug. Okay, now we found this guy. And ball number 3, here we go. Found it. Cool. So it looks like we got about the farthest range so far on the triple Hornady defense. Yeah, we got maybe about 60% through. Right about here is where all 3 of them ended, roughly in the same area. Not too bad, actually. So we got the most penetration so far, just slightly over that 3-inch slug, these 2.5-inch. All right, now here's the one I'm really curious about, the PDX1 410. Now, I've seen a lot of videos of the 2.5-inch variant of this, but this is the 3-inch where we get an extra plate and 4 extra BBs. 750 velocity, so it's going to be the same as the last one we just fired, but we have a hell of a lot more projectiles here, much heavier payload. Oh, that one kicks. Okay, looks like we grazed a lot of the top right here, probably a lot of the BBs. Let's see where we hit. I might have just grazed that shot entirely. So let me do a little switcheroo here, bring that 50% to the front, and we'll calculate it from there. Take 2. All right, I have a clearer area. Nice little pattern right there too. It didn't spread. Those are all 4 plates right there. That looks like one of the BBs. One BB made it through. I don't know what happened to the rest of them. I wonder if they scattered down here because I heard something deflect. There's our plates. I can see them in there. There's one. All right, they didn't go too far. This probably is the shortest we've seen so far, but you only made it maybe 15, 20% through the whole stack. They all lodge right here. This is maybe like 50 plates or so, 60. There they are. Here's what I was able to recover in that same spot. All 4 of our defensive discs that you can see on the bottom of my hand there were grouped up in pretty much the exact same spot. So again, nice tight little spread. This, I believe, is our original 45 long Colt I fired that grazed the top and lodged itself somewhere in the back of the plate. So when I switched the plates around, this guy just kind of found its way in there. So obviously it did not deform as much as our first 45 long Colt. The plates didn't really deform at all. I mean, they are plates. It is what it is. So maybe take that for what it's worth. They're covering a lot of surface area, so maybe that's a good thing regardless. And I recovered 2 of the BBs that were on the ground. I don't know what happened to the other 14 BBs. Let me try to shoot that one more time just so I can see what's going on with the BBs. Let me try to aim a little lower this time. All right, take 3. So I think I chewed out the top here where the plates went. Here, there's a plate right there. It landed. Unless that's from the previous shot, but... 1 BB here, 1 BB here. Looks like there's one down here. One of these is probably one of the previous BBs, but that was aiming pretty low too. That looks new down here. I don't know where any of them went. I think one of the plates went that way. All 3 times I fired those PDXs, we had kind of a random result each time. Usually they bunch together, but I think I just completely missed it. But we got some of the BBs here. And we're missing, again, the other 14 or so. Not sure where they're going. Whether I aimed a little high, whether I aimed a little low. They seem to be scattering somewhere around here. But what we do know for sure, when we did hit them head on right here, they did not penetrate as far as any of the other rounds we fired so far. So even these 3 inchers right here of the PDXs, it looks like it's all about the amount of projectile, not how much they're penetrating. Maybe that could be the point behind them, but I saved what I'm assuming is going to be the best for last. We have some 3-inch 410 double-aught buck. See what it does. I have no idea what this FPS is. Did not eject very well. It got a little stuck. Let's see how it did. Looks like I hit in the exact same spot near those other 4 plates that I used to hit. So 1, 2, 3, 4... maybe that's 5. There's a round right here. So it looks like we stopped right about here. Here's at least one of the rounds. I can see it about right here. A little bit farther than the PDXs we just fired. There's one ball. Another. Here's what I managed to recover, just these three. The other two went somewhere around there, maybe deflected somewhere, maybe got in the dirt. I don't know. There's our deformation. Again, okay, but not great. They kind of just look like FMJs. But the fact is we're getting 5 of them. The other 2 went who knows where. Put a new plate in the front just so we can get a little scatter test just to see how tight these are. All right, let's see how we did. Let's just check the front plate. I know it's turning more and more of a mess. I was aiming pretty much the center. Thought I was aiming a little low, but it looks like we got all 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there's all of our other rounds. It's turning more and more into a mess because I keep reusing these. Nice deformation up here as far as the plates are concerned, though. There's a projectile here, flattened out. Kind of looks like one of those Defender discs now. One here, one here. And these are doing okay. They went a little bit farther than the plates did, but talking the copper plates, not the paper plates. But they're scattering quite a bit. We got like about double the spread compared to our, let's say, the Hornady triple defense. So these are going to scatter a little bit more, but you are getting more projectiles. But I have one more test to do that has nothing to do with the Taurus Judge. So just to compare how these Taurus Judge rounds are doing compared to something more standard that a lot more people are familiar with, this Glock 17 G5. We're going to be firing this 9mm 115 grain. Let's just see how it compares to all the other rounds we've been firing today. There we go. So there we are. There's our entry wound. Let's just follow that guy carefully. So this is about how much farther our 9 got. That's gotta be it right there. Okay, looks like we're about 65–70% of the way through all of the plates with the 9. So that penetrated further than any round we fired. Here's some remnants of our double-aught buckshot, the 3-inch. And then here are our 45 long Colts. This is our 9mm. This is the Hornady triple defense that came out of the 2.5-inch. Not this one, sorry. These are our PDX1 out of the 3-inch Defender remnants I found. And here's a 3-inch 410 Slug. The 9mm clearly is the winner as far as penetration goes. Didn't deform that much, but these are paper plates. It's not ballistic gel or anything, so it's not the most thorough test. 45 long Colt looks the most devastating as far as a single round goes, but it did not penetrate as much as our Hornady triple defense did. The PDX1s penetrated the least amount, actually. These are probably the least impressive from what I've seen during this test anyway. Okay, so what's the takeaway? Well, from left to right, I have these placed in order of what penetrated the least to what penetrated the most. First, obviously, we had the 410 Birdshot. This happened to be 9 shot loads rated at 1250 FPS, half an ounce. Now keep in mind when they rate these, they're generally rating these with actual shotguns that I'm assuming have at least an 18.5-inch barrel. Who knows how long the barrels actually are? I'd imagine they're actually using longer ones so they can just get a higher number in the box. Who knows? But typically you're going to reach the 750, maybe at most 850 FPS range when you're talking about a handgun. I was not able to measure it myself. I'm just kind of doing my own calculations using math. Other than the ones rated on the boxes themselves that are meant for 410 handguns, such as the critical defense rate here, as well as the PDX1s. These are both rated at 750 FPS. However, for the rest of these, from all the specs I looked up, we're getting much higher numbers. For example, the Slugs, they're rated at 1755. We're obviously not getting 1755 out of this. That was probably who knows how long of a shotgun they rated that out of. A general rule of thumb is you can take a long shotgun and then reduce its velocity by about 25%. That's close to the number you're going to get out of a handgun, maybe even less than that. But anyway, obviously this only went through maybe one stack of paper plates, about 40. There's been numerous tests online. 410 Birdshots are simply not good enough against human attackers, bad people. Against aliens, aliens. I meant to say animals. Aliens, maybe. I don't know. Probably not. But against rabid animals, like raccoons, foxes, snakes, things like that. Yeah, these will be just fine. You can't even miss with these things. You barely even have to aim. For small animals, game like that, this is fine. But even 12-gauge birdshot is considered not typically good enough for home defense in most cases. So good luck with a 410. So the PDX1 410 Defenders, these actually surprise me. Again, these are 3-inch, 2.5-inch on the left. And you can see the higher brass right there. I'm assuming it's completely just filled with the powder. This is the heaviest load too. They don't really have the specs on here. It's kind of difficult to find the individual weight in grains of the BBs as well as the discs. I call them plates in the video. They call them discs. The defense discs right here I'm not sure what they weigh, but from my own calculations, after doing some research and doing some calculations based on other shots of similar length and measuring things, I'm assuming we have a total payload of about 357 grains in here, somewhere around there. If somebody can correct me, please let me know. But that's heavy, really, really, really heavy. And then you can even see just by the brass, we probably have more powder in there as well. But again, I can't find information on these anywhere. The 750 velocity being the same as these guys, they both are rated at 750. We have about 240 grain total payload here, probably closer to a 350 grain payload here, over 100 more grains. And yet we had the worst penetration as far as these go compared to the Birdshot anyway. These aren't really even worth mentioning, but these guys did not penetrate well at all, maybe like 60 plates or so. But keep in mind, this is a paper plate test. It's kind of just another form of wood when you stack so many paper plates up like that. At a certain point, it's almost like trying to shoot through a big old block of wood. But I was still surprised. These did not go far in at all. But the more I reviewed the footage, the more I thought about it, these defensive discs, because they're already kind of expanded, it kind of looks like an FMJ that already was fired. That's how these are already shaped. So we have a lot of stored energy in here. And if you watch the footage, when I fired the paper plates, you saw those paper plates just flip up in the air and go crazy every single time. Simply the shape of these defense discs, because they're so flat, we have such a wide surface area, they're not really meant to penetrate well. Otherwise, they'd be shaped like a bullet, that typical little missile shape. That's why they're shaped that way, because over the last over 150 years or so, we kind of figured out, oh, that's a very good shape to pierce through stuff. But these plates already look like they're expanded, so we're getting a large surface area and a lot of immediate stopping power. That's a big old shock wave they were causing without really piercing much. So it can be kind of deceiving. It looks like they may have performed the least, but you know, even just by judging by the specs, it's a very, very, very heavy payload we're getting out of these, especially the 3-inchers. These double-aught bucks, the 5 shots, we're getting 5 double-aught buckshots in here. And again, it was kind of tricky to find some specs, but I believe these were rated at 1233 or something, a little over 1200, maybe 1300 FPS. But again, that's certainly not going to be out of a handgun, even out of the results we've seen, out of a full-size, 410 shotgun. So we're probably getting, again, closer to 800 FPS or so. Maybe it's also 750. You can even see, we got less brass in there, but they pierce a little bit better than these guys, about twice as much. It's a pretty impressive payload overall. It's pretty heavy, but we just got a kind of a mediocre performance from them. Next up, this is of the 45 hollow point long haul that I currently own. 250 grains, 960 FPS. That's a really, really, really heavy, slow round, even for this size. A 45 long haul, you can certainly get faster one, but they still pierced more than these guys. We got a okay performance with them. Next up, I was really curious about the 410 3-inch Slug. It's 1/4 of an ounce. See the brass a little bit longer than the PDX1s right there. Certainly longer than our Buckshot, and I would believe that we're probably just getting more powder in here. And again, these are rated at 1755. And I want to say if we reduce it down, maybe we might be getting closer to like 1300 FPS for a handgun, possibly. And I would believe it because it penetrated pretty well. It certainly penetrated a lot more than any of these guys were here. It penetrated a little bit more than our 45 long Colt. We're just getting a much, much, much higher FPS out of these, but a much, much, much lower weight. Again, these are half the weight. 114 grains versus the 250 grains. This weighs more than double that as far as the projectile is concerned, but that makes sense. We got a little higher FPS, much lower weight. It penetrated a little bit further, but it didn't look like it caused nearly as much damage as this would have. This one I was surprised actually went the furthest. It's our 410 triple defense, and it's a 2.5 inch. One thing that's interesting, again, we can see the brass about the same height. It doesn't really tell us that much. I don't actually know how much powder is in here and how it's charged, but it's kind of an interesting comparison right there. 41 caliber Slug at the top. It's kind of like a 40 S&W, kind of a wimpy 40 S&W, and then we got like 235 caliber balls, which are kind of like 2 triple-aught bucks, 750 FPS, which is not the most impressive. Again, for this weight, this payload, that's pretty impressive. It's still penetrated way farther than all of the others. Very, very tight triangular pattern, even at the 7 yards I was firing from. Very, very little spread with these guys. I'm actually surprised. These guys right here, the Buckshot, that spread a good like 3 inches or so, maybe even more. These also just a little under 3 inches of spread, but this had a very, very tight pattern, very far range, high penetration low spread. Now, the first time I fired these, when I said I think I only found the 2 projectiles, I'm wondering if what happened was that actually was all 3 of the projectiles in my hand. They just fired at such an angle and in such a way that they all just kind of melded together and created that kind of lead mess. And for whatever reason, they flattened and mushroomed and deformed so quickly that they did not penetrate as far. Not sure why that happened, but that was a very interesting result. But when they did not do that, we got a much faster penetration. Now, again, this is not FBI grade ballistic gel or anything. I've watched many videos on 410 ballistics, and I've seen the 2.5-inch variants of the PDX1 Defenders actually penetrate further than these guys right here, even the shorter ones. But in my test, these penetrated way more than the PDX ones. These just did not penetrate well, and I think that just has something to do with their surface area of the plates, the defensive discs right here. So we're still getting a lot of shock, but because of since the paper plates, believe it or not, are a much more dense material when they're stacked up like that compared to ballistic gel, what I think was happening was that material was just stopping these from moving so much, and it was just creating more of a shock wave rather than going through it. Really interesting. They're not very great for penetration when it comes to armor, let's just say. But if you're talking flesh, the results might be completely different. Maybe one day I'll do another test through actual ballistic gel, but that's not what I had at the moment. So really bizarre results with these PDX ones. I'm not really sure what was going on there. But now, another thing I will say about these guys, I would not recommend firing these out of any handgun because the first one did not eject very well. It got kind of stuck. The next one I fired did okay, but when I fired these off camera a handful of times, sometimes these shells would flare up in the cylinder so much after firing that you couldn't even rotate the cylinder anymore. You had to jam it out. These are simply not meant for handguns. They're game loads meant for actual 410 shotguns. It's interesting to see the 3-inch versus the 2.5-inch variants. It doesn't really tell you much about how much more velocity you're going to get. It's up to the manufacturer. They could throw in more powder out of a 3-inch shell and not increase the amount of projectile you're getting. You'd have the same grain, the same amount of weight out of the 3-inch 410 shell versus a 2.5-inch variant, but just have more powder, and now you have a higher muzzle velocity. Or the other way around, like what they did for these guys right here. Instead of the 2.5-inch PDX ones, we have the same velocity, 750. The 2.5-inch PDX ones are also claimed to be 750. We're just getting an extra defense disc and 4 extra BBs. So they must have added just a little bit more powder to compensate for the extra weight they added to the round. And that's very interesting. So we're getting a higher weight at the same velocity as the smaller rounds. So if that's correct, if anything, these are just going to be better than the 2.5-inch variants because, again, same velocity, but we're just getting more projectiles. So if you can get these, if you have a Judge Magnum and you can accept that extra 1/2 inch longer shell, you might as well just pick these up instead. Now the Slug, again, we got pretty good penetration. The recoil was really low too, but these are very expensive. This was $10 for just 5. There's a reason behind having slugs. The point is that you can fire a single projectile with good accuracy out of a shotgun. That's the whole point of the slugs. Shotguns are inherently meant for firing multiple projectiles. This is sort of to circumvent that. The thing is, though, if we have a Judge or a Smith & Wesson Governor or whatever company comes out with whatever next, the Janitor that Winchester might make or something, who knows, but we already have the 45 long Colt rounds. These are already single projectiles, and I've watched many videos comparing 410 slugs to 45 long Colts, and these simply just do not do as well. They're more expensive, they're less accurate. Recoil is nice and light on these typically, but because we have the 45 long Colts already, there isn't much of a reason I know of as to why you'd get a slug, even a 3-inch slug. Again, very high velocity on here. Even though it penetrated second best, I still would not recommend these because, again, we can just get a 45 long Colt ballistically that just has a higher FPS that will still be much heavier than this and just penetrate more and cause more damage. So our slugs are out of the game. I don't see them being very useful for defense out of these. If you have them, they'll do okay, but I just wouldn't pick them. And then, of course, obviously our Birdshot's not going to be very good for defense either. In fact, these are extremely wimpy. You can even see a video, Gun Sam, I believe, did. He fired almost point blank at a target, and they didn't even go through the defensive goggles the fake ballistic guy was wearing there. So, yeah, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was these rounds specifically, but something like that, just not for human defense. Although these ejected okay on camera, when I was firing these off camera, these flared up as well, even these short little things. The brass down here, for whatever reason, it just expands so much and you can barely move. You can't even move the cylinder anymore sometimes. Out of my Public Defender Poly Judge, these generally did okay, but for whatever reason, out of the steel Magnum, they did not. So these also do not eject well. They flare up. They're not consistent. They're too weak. I would never use these. these. These are also out. At close range, they'll do fine, but at the 7 yards or so, I would just pick something else. I don't think they're going to penetrate far enough. Yeah, you're getting a lot of projectile there, but it's just, they're not meant for handguns. These are meant for actual shotguns. And again, these also flared up so bad I couldn't even move the cylinder anymore. Not on camera, but when off camera, they're just not meant for that. These are also out. So it comes down to our 45 long Colts. Again, these are slow, maybe not these ones in particular, but any kind of jacketed hollow point 45 long Colt. Our PDX1 410 Defenders, and then our 400 critical defense 410 triple defense. That's kind of a mouthful, but these rounds are all actually meant for handguns, so it's no surprise these guys I'm going to recommend them more for defense. But these ones right here, the triple defenses, are very, very interesting. It's interesting that they have such a tight squeeze. We're getting kind of like almost the size of a quarter. It looked like that was our spread at even 7 yards or so. Very, very tight triangular spread. And for shotguns, typically you want a very wide spread, I would imagine. To me, it's almost kind of contradictory. It's almost like it's not really giving you the spread that you'd want out of a shotgun round. We're getting closer to what looks like a normal round, although it's certainly wider. It's not, the size of a dime like most bullets will be. We're getting size closer to a quarter or even $50 or so. So we're getting a little bit more spread. It's going to be a little bit harder to miss with these, but I just find it kind of contradictory how these barely spread at all. I want a little bit of spread, but I don't want too much spread. I don't want to be a big old like fishing net or anything, but I want something a little bit wider than a single bullet. And then all three of these projectiles coming at you. Again, it's a 240 grain payload. It's still very, very heavy, 10 grains less than this. But when we talk about the whole anti-carjacking thing that a lot of people bring up when we're talking about the Smith & Wesson governors and the Taurus judges, when you're firing near point blank or within a foot, a couple feet, or less than a yard away from someone, these cause massive, massive gaping wounds. Just ballistically, when you're that close, they spread a lot more. All three rounds or the multiple pellets, whatever you're firing at that close of a range, they're really going to rip in and work together and create a massive, massive gaping, messy, nasty wound channel when it's really, really close. So you can look at ballistics and numbers all you want, but when you actually see these in action, the story kind of changes a little bit. So in a very, very close range, these are still good. And if you want to be able to shoot at far range as well, that's kind of where these come in. Not extremely impressed with them, but I think they're okay. They're not bad. You're still going to cause a lot of damage with them if that dark and rainy day ever came. You had to fire at someone. I still trust these. I still like to use these because I want a shotgun round, but I don't want too much spread. 45 long Colts are extremely polarizing. I got some really, really heavy ones right here, and they didn't penetrate as far as these did in the paper plates anyway, but we got a really, really nasty mushrooming with the bullet right there, like you'd expect. If you don't care for the 410 thing, you think it's a gimmick, you don't like them, blah, 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 you can get a 45 long Colt. There's some that are ballistically almost as powerful as 44 Magnums. It's a very, very polarizing round. The ballistics are all over the place with these guys, so it's not really fair for me to say this is like all other 45 long Colts. There's just way too many others. But finally, we're going to talk about our PDX1 410 Defenders. These I recommend most for home defense, actually. Now, you might think that's weird how during the paper plate test anyway, they did not penetrate very far at all. In fact, they did the worst next to the Birdshot. But if you look at the sheer energy going into those things, it's the shape of these rounds, the shockwave they were causing to the paper plates. I think it's simply just the shape. These are much, much heavier than all of the other 410 rounds I fired. I think clocking at 1.15 ounces or something. And again, it's difficult to find information on these, but I think the grains are about 357, maybe 350 total. We're talking all these projectiles coming at you at 750 FPS. That's pretty impressive, actually. Now, they didn't penetrate very well, but if you're living in an apartment or if you just don't want to go through walls or anything, isn't that kind of what you want? You don't want these to penetrate very far, just enough to cause damage. And again, you can look at ballistic gel videos. These actually do much better than my paper plate test. In fact, they went in further than these. And again, that's talking about the 2.5-inch variants, not the 3-inch variants. I think they penetrate and do just enough damage, but also don't penetrate through harder materials as well, such as walls, which is what you want. Again, if you live in an apartment or a tighter area, you don't want high penetration. You just want a lot of scatter, a lot of spread, stop the one person or stop the threat without hurting anyone else that did not deserve to get hit. That's actually what these are good for if you're one-on-one in a small room or something like that. Now, out in public, I absolutely would not. These are the last things I would probably carry in a handgun because these BBs, man, they scatter so much. I was really amazed, actually. I barely got any of them on those paper plates, even from 7 yards. They just scatter like crazy. The Copper discs, actually, I was impressed with how tight. We had a nice little tight pattern, about 2 inches or so. So at that rate, with that much of a payload coming at you, let's say it was half of this, although it was probably a little bit more than half. Let's just say, I don't know, it was, let's say 200 grains worth of the copper plates, maybe something like that. I don't know, maybe at 180 or something. But all 4 of those, hell, even just 3 of them hitting someone, even with it from a few yards away, because they're all working together like that, that amount of shock they're going to cause, that's going to hurt like hell. It's going to be a big old shock wave it's going to create in that person just because of how they're shaped. And not only are we getting multiple projectiles, the projectiles themselves, the discs anyway, are very wide, covering a lot of surface area. So again, very difficult to miss with those. And on top of that, we got the BBs thrown in here for good measure. Winchester claims that the BBs are intended to kind of compromise for missed shots. If you missed that tight little spread, even though it's kind of hard to miss, you know, a 2-inch radius that the discs cover, but if the BBs kind of are gap fillers, if you miss those, it's very, if you point it in that person's general direction, the guy who's attacking you, trying to kill you or whatever, you pretty much have like a 100% chance of hitting them with something. At least one of those BBs is going to hit them, probably 4 or 5. No, the BBs themselves are kind of wimpy. They're not going to do much, but as an addition to the plates, the discs, interesting. They're kind of like gap fillers. They compensate for missed shots. If you miss that tight little squeeze, and again, even at 7 yards, we're just getting a 2-inch diameter or so. Some people argue, why not just get rid of the BBs? Why not just throw in more discs? Yeah, it's debated. I kind of agree. I kind of don't agree. It's an interesting round because they kind of work together. But again, if you're out in public, because of those BBs, that's why I would not recommend these. They just scatter way too damn much. You know, if you're at Walmart, somebody's trying to kill you, you don't want to shoot at that guy. Yeah, successfully stop the threat, but then what if 5 of those BBs veer off and hit somebody else in one of the other aisles that you didn't intend to hit? No, you're not going to kill them with those things, but you're going to get in a lot of trouble. That's your responsibility. So would not recommend these for defense in heavily populated areas, but I recommend them the most for home defense. And if you're out and about really late at night, let's say out in the woods or something, because not only, let's say you have a human attacker, it's just going to be probably a one-on-one thing, or just multiple human attackers. You don't have to worry about anyone innocent getting hit, but also these BBs kind of act as a way to also fend off snakes, rabid animals, wolves, things like that, I think. Not just the BBs alone, but because we have kind of a jack of all trades payload going here, we both can stop human attackers as well as small animals. You barely have to aim because of the BBs, but you also, if you do aim well, you can still, I think, put somebody down with those discs right there. So really weird, interesting niche, but also jack of all trades round. It's very interesting. I just wouldn't use this to defend myself in a heavily populated area in public, but inside a car, inside my own house, in an apartment, if you're out and about alone in the woods or something like that, camping, these actually have their place, I think. That's very interesting. And these rounds all ejected well, too. These rounds are actually intended for 410 handguns, so I didn't have any problems ejecting these. They're nice and silky smooth. If you get any kind of, like, you know, random 410 round meant for game, meant for actual shotguns, you're kind of rolling the dice there that may or may not eject well on you. You got to get out and test those things. But the ones designed specifically for handguns, I have not seen any problems yet. So slugs, they penetrated well, but I don't see why you'd use them if you can already use the 45 long Colts. The 410s are basically just jokes if you're going up against humans. I'm not saying they're useless, but I would never ever use these against human attackers. They're probably not going to do anything other than piss them off a little bit. The double-aught buckshot, they didn't penetrate that well either. We're getting a pretty heavy payload here, but they simply don't penetrate far enough, I don't think, and I don't think that's enough to compensate for it, unless you're like point blank, but you can do a lot of damage with any gun point blank, so it's kind of redundant, and these just flared up way too much, so not intended for handguns either. 45 long Colt, again, this did good, but all 45 long Colts will do good in their own right. You can get much, much higher powered ones ballistically and you'll be all set, but then you lose the wide radius of spread. You lose the capability of having multiple projectiles going at your target. And that's why I would buy a Judge or a Governor in the first place. But regardless, you can still have the option to use that. And then these guys right here, in my paper plate test, the shape of these plates going up against other plates, I feel like they're just smacking together, flattening like pancakes immediately, and it's just caused them not to penetrate. Certainly doesn't mean they won't cause damage, they're just not penetrating through a dense material like that. So maybe against people in armor, much more heavily padded materials, trying to shoot through cars, good luck, this is not going to do very well. But against a straight up civilian wearing a jacket or something, Again, if you're in a very closed off area and there's no other people around, these I'd actually recommend. In fact, this is my home defense Taurus Judge Magnum round, or these guys, for all the reasons I just explained. Do you need a 3-inch Judge over a 2.5 inches? They're that clear of an advantage. Through my testing, nothing really noticeable. I mean, even if you don't care for the 3-inch cylinder, you're still getting a 1/2 inch longer length, which means a little bit higher muzzle velocity, just a little bit. But we just have more options. You can use a 2.5 inch or 3-inch rounds if you find anything that tickles your fancy. It's just not necessary. You'd probably do just fine with a 2.5 inch, but you certainly have more variety with this guy. So thank you so much for watching. Menix out.